Hey readers, I'm excited to talk to you today more about some mysteries. I'm excited. I got to Zoom with some of you, and I'm excited that you're excited about your mysteries that you're reading and about our absent author book that we finished. But I think what I'm most excited about is that you guys are becoming experts at being mystery readers. And so today, I want us to talk about that when we talk about mysteries to other people. A lot of times we talk about using words that make us sound like an expert on whatever it is that we're talking about. So today, I'm going to give you a term that we touched on just a little bit before spring break. Logan actually had it in one of his mysteries, and he asked me about it. And it's a word that you'll sometimes hear in a mystery, and it's kind of a strange word. And honestly, I'm not really even sure where it comes from or why they use this term, but it's called a red herring. And like I said, we talked a little bit about that before, and it's red, Herring, red herring. Okay, so as an expert mystery reader, you're always going to be on the lookout for a red herring when you're reading a mystery story, okay? And so a red herring, well, what that means is if you're reading a mystery and you come across something that you think might be a clue, it might not actually be a real clue, okay? It might be a trick and something that an author puts into a story to throw the detectives off that are in the story, but also to throw you off as the reader of the mystery, okay? And so as we learn more about clues, we want to keep that in mind, these red herrings. Okay, a lot of times when we read a mystery, it seems like our detective, they guess wrong at first. Not always, but sometimes their first guess is wrong. Okay, and it's not necessarily an accident that they solve it incorrectly the first time. Because if a mystery was easy to solve, we wouldn't have much of a story. So the crime would happen and the detective would come in and they'd solve the mystery, and then the mystery would be over and we just wouldn't have much of a story. So that's why an author a lot of times will write that the detective maybe makes a guess and then that guess is wrong. And then the mystery gets to keep happening. Okay? And so a lot of times that's why an author will put a red herring in there to throw the detective off track. Okay. And like I said, and it throws us as the reader of the mystery off track as well. So remember, a red herring will look like a real clue. Okay. That's why it can be so tricky. Because you may, as a reader, be reading along and you think, oh, that's a clue, okay? But a lot of times what you'll notice with a red herring is that it's so obvious that it's a clue that it's really not a clue. And we're going to talk about that. I'll show you an example of that from a story that we've been reading, okay? The person who, what we call, planted the clue really wants you to think that it's a clue, okay? So, what we really need to do is when we come to a clue, instead of being really excited and be like, oh, I think I solved the mystery, we need to kind of, as a reader, take a step back and ask ourselves, is this a real clue or is this a red herring? And not necessarily just jump on the first clue that we see, okay, and think that we've solved the case. So I want us to look back a little bit at our absent author mystery, okay? And think about some times or a time that we were suspicious, that we came across a clue that made us suspicious, okay? Some were probably real clues and some were probably red herrings. And so I came across one that a clue that I had written down. And this one says, Wallace Wallace wrote to Dink. So this was from early on in our book, from like chapter 2, maybe chapter 1, or chapter 1 actually. And a clue that I wrote said, Wallace Wallace wrote to Dink. Short of being kidnapped, nothing will stop me from coming. Well, I wrote down that I think this means Wallace Wallace didn't show up at the bookstore because he was kidnapped. So I want to go back and I want to read that entire letter that Wallace Wallace wrote to Dink on this page right here. Okay. And let's think about, do you think this is a real clue? Or do you think this is maybe what we call a red herring? Something so obvious that it can't be a clue. Dear Mr. Duncan, thank you for your kind letter. I'm so impressed that you've read all my books. I have good news. I've made arrangements to come to the Book Nook to sign books. I can use part of my time for research. Thanks for your picture. I'm so happy to finally meet one of my most loyal fans. Short of being kidnapped, nothing will stop me from coming. See you soon, Wallace Wallace. So, who thinks that this is a red herring and who thinks that this is a real clue? Okay, now that I look back on it, and especially now that we've finished the story, I'm thinking that when Wallace Wallace wrote that letter, well, when Wallace Wallace was pretending to be Mavis Green, she was actually trying to trick Dink, okay? I think she planted this clue right here on purpose, all right? To get Dink and all of us to think that she had actually been kidnapped. I think that was what was going on here. Okay, that letter is trying to get people off track, and that's what we call a red herring. Okay, so what I want you to notice is how we thought back across some old clues that we had from our absent author book. Clues that maybe tricked us and that tricked the detectives in the story. Clues that turned out to not be a real clue at all. Okay, so we as expert mystery readers have to be what's called skeptical. Okay, that's a really big word. And if you're skeptical about something, that means you kind of have doubts about it. Okay, you don't jump on it right away. You just stop and pause and think. That might be a clue, but it might not be a clue. Okay, and we can think, is the author, are they just planting that clue to try to trick me and try to trick the detectives in the book? So now we can always go back and find those clues that were red herrings in books that we've already read, but we can also look ahead. So we read chapters 1 through 3 in The Diamond Mystery. But one thing I'm going to do is read ahead just a little bit in chapter 4 to see if we have any red herrings in this chapter or anything we think might be a red herring. Okay? So, this is when Jerry and Maya start their investigation. Okay? And they go into the store. And they're talking to Mr. Carrot about the diamonds that have been stolen and about all of his employees. Okay? So as I read, I want you to think, could any of these clues be here to distract me as a reader? Okay? And are any of these clues in here to distract Jerry and Maya as the detectives? Okay? Chapter 4, The Suspects. In the hallway between the office and the store, Mr. Carrot stopped suddenly and lowered his voice to a whisper. Please help me catch the thief, otherwise I'll be bankrupt soon. Jerry and Maya had no time to reply before Mr. Carrot walked on. They followed him into the store to meet the other 3 employees, Vivian Leander, Danny Braveheart, and Luke Smith. Mr. Carrot stood in the middle of the store and introduced everyone. Okay? So, those so far are some possible suspects because we know they work in the store. Okay? Miss Leander, Mr. Braveheart, and Mr. Smith. Okay? Because early on, Mr. Carrot said the diamonds didn't leave the store. He didn't see them leave the store. So I'm going to read this next part, and I want you to tell me what you think. Is this a clue, or is this a red herring? This is Jerry and Maya. They're going to work here for a few days. They will wash the windows, empty the trash, run errands, and help with other odds and ends. Vivian and Luke stepped forward to shake hands and say hello. Vivian wore a glittering necklace. So, talk with somebody close by. You can even talk to your dog if your dog's close by, or a cat. Tell them what you think. Do you think there's a clue right there? And if so, what do you think the clue might be? Talk to somebody, mom or dad or a pet or somebody. I'm just wondering if there was anything in there that was put there to distract us. Is any part of that a red herring? Okay. Who are the suspects so far? Make sure you're using characters' names. Don't just say there was a woman and a man. Make sure you're actually using their names. So there was Vivian, and there was Danny, and there was, who was the other one? Luke. His name was Luke. Okay. So use their names. All right. So one thing I noticed was that it talked about Vivian, and that Vivian was wearing a shiny, glittering, it sounded like a fancy necklace. So I'm thinking, you know what? That could be a clue, but I'm also thinking it might be a red herring, because if Vivian was stealing the diamonds, would she have them out in the open like that? I don't think she would, but you know, when you're first reading it, you might think, oh, that's a clue. She's wearing the diamonds that she stole. But then I have to think, would she really do that? So I might take and write that down on my sticky note. And when I wrote that, Vivian's necklace could be a red herring. If Vivian didn't steal the diamonds, who did? And where did she get that expensive necklace? So, it could be a clue, but it could also be a red herring. But I'm skeptical of this clue. That means I'm not 100% sure that this is a clue. Okay? And I hope that makes sense. So, I want to talk about what I think the red herring is, but I also want to talk about why I think it might be a red herring, or why it might truly be a clue. Okay? So, that needs to be both parts of your thinking. So what I want you to do today when you read is, if you spot something in your mystery that you think might be a red herring or it might be a clue, I want you to write it down in your notebook. Okay? You can write it on a sticky note and just make a little note beside it that says, I really think this is a clue, but it also could be a red herring. Either way. Okay? Also, keep up with your timelines as you're reading through your mysteries. After each chapter, okay, be sure to retell that chapter a little bit. Try to read for 20 to 30 minutes today, and I hope you're enjoying your mysteries. If you have any questions, let me know. Off you go.